But it's nonsense. It's crap. It's deflection. It's trying to sort of demean and deride and deflect away from the central thing. I'm not 12 years of age. I'm not going to have a fight with Eddie Hearn. I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm not trying to be divisive. Welcome to episode 4 of Talk Boxing with myself and Spencer Oliver. Episode 4. I said it wouldn't last. Spencer Oliver, or should I say sick note. We're lucky to have you here today. The gurney that carried you up and the life support machine that brought you in and the oxygen that we're pumping in to keep you alive. We're recording today for all you guys that would have thought this was coming out a little bit earlier today because Spencer's been a little bit ill. Listen, a little bit unwell.
No sympathy whatsoever. I think it's disgraceful. Like, we know that there's loads of illnesses floating around at the moment, a lot of flu floating around, and you're lucky you got me today, if I'm honest. I dragged myself off the city just because I wanted to be a part of this.
The Darren Anderson of boxing, sick note.
And the fact that you said...
you boxers had substance and backbone and could physically overcome things. And we'd have to listen to, I'm not feeling very well this morning, I'm a little bit unwell.
All I'm going to say is pride got me here, right? Because when you wrote in our little chat, when you wrote, oh, sick note, give him one more strike and he's out. Yeah,
exactly.
We'll find someone. We'll find someone.
I'll do it on my own.
I was like, right... Get yourself up, Spence, dust yourself off, and here we are. But anyway, let's get on with the show.
Looking at the recent times, obviously we've been quite strong on our views, and I've been quite critical of other outlets that seem to want to have a relationship with the promoters that involves them not really asking very difficult questions or allowing the fundamental question, to keep on being put on the back burner, which is... why was there a continued attempt to allow a fight to go on with knowledge that a fighter had failed a drugs test?
Sure.
And I'm still struggling. I'm watching the background noise. I'm seeing Eddie Hearn and, you know, this little gang of refugees from the Wizard of Oz that work for him that are making facetious comments about me or about my propensity to ask questions or my lack of knowledge or what businesses I may own or what colour my hair may be and who may have met me 20 years ago. None of it being relevant, all of it being a distraction, leading up to some ridiculous scenario of where I'm apparently going to have a charity fight with Eddie Hearn and Spitbucket Frank Smith's going to come along and have a go as well.
Well, no, yeah, I think that Frank Smith actually, he come out and said, didn't he, that, I forget Eddie Hearn, I want to fight Simon. So,
but
I mean, what is this?
It's nonsense, it's crap, it's deflection. It's trying to sort of demean and deride and deflect away from the central thing. I'm not 12 years of age. I'm not going to have a fight with Eddie Hearn. I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm not trying to be divisive. I'm trying to understand why it is that no one seems to have the balls to say, right, let's go through this set of questions. How has a fighter failed his test? Why are we being told that the first people's knowledge of it was September the 23rd, when now we find out that the first test was in the end of July, which means everyone's knowledge of it was August? Why are people blaming the British Boxing Board of Control for a situation? Why are people suggesting, by people I mean the promoters, why are people suggesting that it's appropriate for the fighters to determine which banned substance they'll allow the other fighter to fight with? And I'm trying to get underneath the skin of why this is such a difficult... I know why it's a difficult question to answer, because nobody wants to answer it, and they rely on the fact that no one else will continue to keep asking the question, and it'll get lost in the ether, and people will forget about it. But I worry, you know, I'm very fascinated by boxing, and I've always been fascinated by it. And I'm not a Johnny-come-lately that wants to throw my two-penneth in the market square. It's a big regret of mine. I put £50 million into football and didn't put it into boxing because I enjoy boxing, sometimes far more than I enjoy football.
Are you going to go back into boxing? Are you going to go into boxing, by the way?
Probably, yeah. In which capacity, I don't know yet, in terms of whether I do it on my own, whether I do it in one of the existing frameworks. But it's something that very much interests me and something that I'm very focused on. But I want to take the right opportunities. There's been a couple of them, and they've been significant ones. But I'm not interested in just acting in haste and repenting at leisure. First of all, I want to know specifically and explicitly what I'm talking about, which is why, to some extent, I got involved with Frank and Benn to make the Parker-Joyce fight.
Sure.
I understood the dynamics of the broadcasting deals and so on and so forth, and put people together that possibly were having a difficulty finding a relationship that they could work with. And at the same time, I think if you're going to get involved in the business, you should know what it looks like before you start writing checks out for it. I learned that lesson in football. But going back to the Eddie Hearn thing, and I I don't want to put you in conflicted positions because I don't care about the consequences of what I say because my career and my relationship with boxing is very different than yours. But I do think it's right that the scenario surrounding Conor Benn, who's a kid that I really, really like and really wanted him to be successful in his career, and the relationships that promoters have. I saw Stephen A. Smith the other day talking in America about promoters getting out of the way of boxing, getting out of the way of fights that people need to have because promoters are the ones that are stopping it and promoters are the reasons why fights are being made.
Sure.
In this instance, we've got promoters, and am I wrong, Spencer? But we've got promoters that were trying to put on a fight that really had no business being put on, and the only thing they're arguing about now is the technicalities of UCAD, over VADA, over legal situations that surround the ability for the Boxing Board of Control to enforce its judgment, which it may have done earlier.
They're moving away from the hard facts, though. The facts are the facts that Conor fouled these. So this is where I am on it, Simon. You know, everybody knows the story now, and that he'd fouled not just one test, but he's failed 2 tests, for the same drug, the fertility drug, which we know what that is, what it does, it increases testosterone, etc., etc. Anyway, it's a banned substance, right? So he was getting his opportunity to speak in front of the board on the 21st of October. He had that hearing. He chose not to do it because he said that it was a misconduct and it was not to do with what was going on now. It was to do with something else. So we don't know what that is, right? So I think the problem that we've got, myself and you and everybody else, but we're more vocal maybe than others, is we're not getting the answers that we need. He's failed the 2 tests. He didn't go in front of the boxing board. He's relinquished his licence. Fine, right, you've give up your licence, so that allows you to be able to box anywhere else. But the facts are the facts that these tests have been, he's tested positive on both of these. And on the flip side, Eubank was being made to make this unrealistic weight, which then really concerned me anyway. And I'm looking at it going, listen, I don't like this. Nothing looks good about it. And then with what's come to light, I'm just going, why can't we get the answers that we are asking or that we need? Like, you know, they're talking about B samples that never ever appeared. And I'd say, all right, fine, there was no B samples. So what is, like, look, you failed positive for 2 tests. And, like, this is not a personal attack at Conor because, like you said, we both really like Conor. But we're talking about the health of the sport and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And the way this whole situation was handled with the British Boxing Board of Control, with the promoters still wanting to put the fight on, etc., etc., I think it's all unacceptable. And we still, to this date, have got no answers. And that's the frustrating thing. We're going, everybody's doing interviews, and Conor's done a couple of interviews that he shouldn't have done. I think he's been ill-advised, but he's putting out some of the comments that he's putting out, and it's just making him look worse. And, you know, this contamination nonsense, rubbish but I think about the 30 eggs a day and whatever it is. It's just nonsense.
I think people are making it up as they go along. And I think what they're doing is they're adapting what they're saying to fit the circumstances and undermining what they've said previously. You know, if we look back through the body of work, my supposition, and it's my supposition, as to how this has played through, is the British Boxing Board of Control would have known that Conor Benn failed his first test in the middle to the end of August. They say the end of August. I don't know why it would take 5 weeks for VADA to report a test. They normally report in a couple of weeks. And we do need to clear up this nonsense about...
But do you think, though, you know, like with this British Boxing Board of Control situation, like, so they hadn't, for whatever reason, they chose not to come to light until the sort of 11th hour, until then. But do you think...
This is where I was going to go with that.
This is taking it away from the actual fact that Conor's failed 2 tests. I know there's loads of stuff surrounding it.
I think what we're talking about is not so much a conspiracy theory, but we're talking about the dynamics of how this has manifested itself, right? And we're being told and led to believe that this is all being conducted in such a fashion that it's all appropriate. And actually now what we're seeing is people looking to redistribute the truth and redistribute blame. And we're now being led to believe that the British Boxing Board of Control, who I do think are a little bit toothless at times and do need to have better legislation behind their authority, are now being positioned as the people that actually should have dealt with this a long time ago. And I'm willing to wager you, although it's supposition, that the way this flowed through was that because it was a VADA test and the contract for this fight was underwritten by a UCAD testing regime, I'm willing to wager you that there was a level of influence and pressure that was put on the British Boxing Board of Control to hold their powder dry while this situation flowed through in a fashion which probably suited those that wanted the fight on. And then it became a situation on the 23rd of September when a second test was failed. That it became increasingly difficult for the British Boxing Board of Control to be held in play by those that perhaps have some influence in creating some doubt or some relationship issues with the British Boxing Board of Control, to such a point that allegedly, to gain and garner public sympathy, I suspect, the British Boxing Board of Control allegedly leaked the tests to the newspapers, which then created this snowball effect. And I do believe that there does need to be accountability for it. I do believe that what we're listening to is preposterous misrepresentations. And we're getting into BS territory of who's asking the question rather than what the question is.
Absolutely, right? That's my point.
And the question is, you told us, Callie and Eddie, on the 23rd of September, the first time you'd heard about a test failing was at that particular time. But that wasn't true, because you knew about a test at the end of August. So there's no reason for you to be telling us on September 3rd. You talked about legals. You can't talk about the legalistics of this particular conundrum. But you can speak, and the reason why legals are in this to some extent is because you brought them in there. You're the first person to reference legals when it came to the situation, full stop. And when I called, and I've addressed this before, and I want to address it again, because I'm tired of this deflection, insofar as my opinion is important. I don't think Eddie Hearn is a coward as a bloke. I think his approach to this subject matter is cowardly. Because normally, Eddie Hearn is like a town crier. When he's got something he wants to say, all of a sudden, he's a mute, and he doesn't want to address this subject, and he wants to go on shows where he's not being asked a question. Because it's not the question that you ask, it's the answer that you get back, and it's the question you answer next with the information that you've got. And we can draw a picture of a situation which is incredibly distasteful. And when we talk about distastefulness, we then move into the territory of this discussion that's been had with Eubank Sr. And Chris Eubank's views, Chris Eubank Sr.'s views, and ultimately Eddie Hearn's response. And I hate to make this all about Eddie Hearn, but these guys are not answering questions. They're trying to discredit people like me by suggesting that I don't know can't find my backside with both hands in a funnel. I've got blonde hair, and that's the reasons why I shouldn't be answering these questions. But now we're moving into territory of saying Chris Eubank Sr. is not in his right mind. Now,
I think Eddie thought that it was maybe distasteful.
And he's saying that
distasteful of me going up there.
And he means you, and he means Jim White. Because he's basically saying you're leveraging a poor fella that don't know what he's doing. And so by that definition, you're taking advantage of him to create a scenario which is not true. How's that distasteful? You
well, listen, I went up there and I had a chat with him, not just on camera, but off camera. We chatted in depth about this situation, and Chris saying that his mental state of mind was due to this fight happening because he knew how dangerous it was for his son, and with the loss of his other son, Seb, etc., etc., etc. And he said to me, Spence, how do you think I am right now? How do you think I look right now? I said, you look fine. He said, exactly that. He said, I've had a weight off my shoulders. He said, because I knew my boy was in serious trouble with this weight issue. 33 years of age, getting down to 157 was unrealistic, and his weight issue. And now with what's come to light, he said, this God played his part in this. He effectively saved my son's life, because that's how serious he thought it was. But speaking to Chris as a person and being with him, spending a few hours with him, his mental state of mind, it wasn't taking advantage of him going up there and having that chat with him, because I thought actually he was in a good place.
But it's also, when going back again, it's also because of the nature of this fight. Surely to God, given the dynamics of this fight, given the catchweight nature of it, there was an even greater duty of care, which is why there's a moral vacuum in here that no one's filling with any real integrity, because we're talking about how we've got to a point, and I want to get onto a second with you in a minute about Conor and where this leaves Conor. Because Conor, I think, is being appallingly advised.
I agree.
I think whatever advice he's taking, he needs to take something from somewhere else. Whether these handlers that are legally positioning him to talk to the Times and the Sun in the same room and suggesting he talks in a certain way whilst having representation in the room, and the positioning, and to tear up his British Boxing Board license and to make it about the boxing and to serve out some idea that people have got a conspiracy ideal against Conor Benn. The British Boxing Board of Control, I've got an agenda and a bias towards him, I just think is ridiculous.
It's crazy.
And also, again, I keep making this point because I just think people are being allowed to have their minds distorted by this, by information. This scenario that Conor wants to advance, and Eddie Hearn will advance on his behalf, about VADA testing and the sign up to it. I am right in saying this, that you sign up to VADA testing in the WBC because you want to be in the top 15 rankings.
Absolutely.
It's not voluntary.
It
It's a
allows you
voluntary
to
sign
be
up.
in the rankings.
It's a voluntary sign up unless you don't want to be ranked.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to be ranked, you don't sign up to it.
Absolutely.
So really and truly, it's not particularly voluntary. It's a necessity to be in the sport operating at the highest level, isn't it?
And also, yes, you're exactly right on that. You're spot on. It puts you in those WBC rankings, which he obviously needs to be in because he's looking for those big fights. We understand all that. But this is the thing that's getting me on that subject as well, is that he's saying, you know, why would I voluntarily sign up to VADA testing? Well, that's the reasons are because of the reasons you've just pointed out. But also, that doesn't make it, because you signed up with that, you're not going to, you know, because you've tested, he's going tested positive. It was like that's a little bit of a smokescreen, if I'm totally honest. Like, why would I sign up to it if I'm going to be, if I'm going to test positive? Well, you did, and you did. So, because you signed up to it, doesn't make go, well, he's got a point there, so perhaps he's not positive. Yeah. The facts are the facts. And this is the fact that it's like 2 positive tests, right? That's it. And there's too much going on around it and too many people trying to deflect blame here, there, everywhere. But the point of it is, the hub of it all is that he's tested positive twice.
Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I've got the wrong attitude and outlook by going after this in the way that I'm going after it? Because I'm quite blunt. I know I'm quite blunt, and I know that people can take exception to it and they can take offence by it, and it's not meant to be, and I'm not intending to attack people personally. Yeah. What I'm trying to do is say, this can't be right. There's a moral obligation upon people to behave properly. The end user, being the public, have a right to see things that are based upon integrity. And I know that using language like coward can get people's noses up, and it will be great for clicks. Yeah. That wasn't the reason why I said it, but it is great for that sort of crap. Sure. But the purpose of it was I genuinely believe. Yeah. I genuinely believe that it's cowardly to duck away from things that you don't like.
I think you want answers. Like I've been saying, we've been asking for these answers, and it seems to be that, like, there's a straight road to these answers, and people are going all over the place, and they're not actually getting to the point. They're not getting to the finish. And I think, like, you know, the eye of the storm was Conor obviously testing positive for these things, but then people are just trying to deflect things everywhere. But we're not getting the answers that we need.
It worries me, you know, and going off on some sort of flight of fancy, not a flight of fancy, but boxing gets away with things like this constant focus on concussion protocols in other sports, bigger sports with more money, and dementia-related diseases, and there's no real focus on these things in boxing. So you really don't need to bring in situations where the sport becomes into disrepute because of people's conduct that can easily be avoided, and leading lights in boxing seeking to obfuscate or avoid or simply just not participate, and then attacking those that want to ask them the questions. I'm at a stage now where one of the things that I was going to say to you, we know what questions we want him to answer. Yeah. Why did you think it was appropriate? It's really simple. Yeah. Cut all the VADA testing up. Why did you think it was appropriate? Why did you think it was appropriate to continue to allow a fight that you knew had a VADA test failed, but not just once, twice? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And given your previous position on VADA testing and all of the observations you've made historically about VADA being the gold standard, how could you possibly ever think there was any validation besides the economic value of this fight to continue with it going on? Sure. Now, I'm not going to go on his stupid podcasts on the BBC. I'm not going to chase him up. I couldn't care less if he comes on our show or this show whatsoever. I think he's got an opportunity to come on our show rather than the other way around. Sure. But I don't know whether we're ever going to get these guys having the courage of their convictions to come and answer these questions and to be pushed on them and to go through it in a chronological, forensic fashion, so we get to the bottom and say, right, so this is about you and your conduct. This was about Conor Benn doing something possibly that he should never have done, and it was about you guys allowing it to go on. Sure. And then it's about what benefit is wisdom if it doesn't profit the wise? Who's going to deal with that information if we ever actually got it? Sure.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think we're ever going to get the answers? Because it's just starting to feel like it's slipping away a little bit for me now. Like I say, there's sort of like the focus seems to be going everywhere but this problem we've got with the testing. Absolutely. But, you know, that's not really, like, Conor Benn failing these tests now has not really become the centre of the storm anymore because there's so much else going on around it. And, like, do you think that,
who's got the appetite for it? And who
But do you think we'll get the answers? What I'm saying is, do you think we'll get the actual...
You're going to get their version of the answers. And if they don't come to people that are going to answer the question, ask them questions and then forensically evaluate and then push back and have the balls to challenge them and say, right, that doesn't sound right. Let me follow that process. And who've done many deals. Whatever businesses I may or may not have had, I've had businesses that have done £2 billion worth of business. I've done many contracts, big and small. So I know what a contract situation looks like. And I know when someone tells me something, what that means in real terms. And I know what legal responsibilities are. And I know how legally you can be prohibited from saying things. And I know how legally accountable you will be for saying things if you do say them. So I know the answers to the questions. That's why I want to ask them.
Yeah.
Do I think they'll answer them? Well, I'm not going on his podcast to do it. And I don't know whether we're going to be bothered to get him on our show because I don't think he's that important. But I do think this subject matter is. So if he's got the courage of his convictions, rather than his silly little bag carriers like Frank Smith running around saying sort of what they think are pseudo-insulting things to try and diminish someone, why don't you stand up as leading industry lights and answer proper questions? So to go to your question, I doubt it. And it depends who's got an appetite to want to know it. Because the British Boxing Board of Control, who sanction these people and who govern these people's existence and allow them to be able to ply their trade as fighters or promoters, doesn't have an appetite for it, then I don't know who else will. Because we'll run out of steam, because it'll go back into the weeds. Everyone will go, geez, Louise, how many times are we going to talk about Eddie Hearn and his bleeding Conor Benn situation? And we'll be the only ones saying it. And eventually, it'll get lost in the ether, and then it'll get lost in blonde hair, businesses, and charity fights. And I don't want that, but I suspect we probably know where it is.
So I'm not training you up for any of these fights now?
No, you're not training me, even though you know that I am actually doing a lot of work in
I
the
do,
pads.
and that's why I sent you the message when I saw Eddie put out his little thing, and I saw Frank Smith come out on his little thing. I was like,
but it's silly.
I was like, Simon,
it's playground
one,
stuff.
I'm going to train you. Two,
I know.
Two, you're going to win.
And it's got nothing to do with cowardice. I'm just not 12.
Yeah, of
right?
course.
And I don't feel the necessity. You know, I'll have a spelling competition with you. Let's have a question of who can ask a question, who can give a real answer. How about that? We'll have a competition with that.
Sure.
Conor Benn, can you see, to close this subject off, can you see any redemption for him? Can you see him finding his way back? Is there a way back for him?
Right. Now, the longer this goes on, Simon, the less chance there is for a way back for him. What I'm saying is that I've gone over this situation many times in my head, and, you know, I found it hard to even accept, you know, when it first come to light, and then this second failed test, etc., etc. Thank you, mate.
Go on. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, anyway, I'll show him after. But, the longer this goes on and the more of a mess it becomes, I think it's going to be more difficult for Conor to get accepted again by the public, you know, because the public now are quite angry with what's going on. Like, it's mad because going into this fight, Conor Benn was the hero and Chris Eubank was the zero, and it's just switched overnight. And now everyone's going, well, bless Chris, you know, he'd done it, and we saw him on the scales at 159 where he looked terrible, still had 2 pounds to go, but he'd actually done it and he was playing by the rule book. Now Conor's putting himself into a very difficult situation, now talking about this contamination stuff, etc., etc., etc. I think it's going to be, the longer this goes on, the harder, the more difficult it is going to be for him to get accepted back into the boxing game, definitely.
Or go overseas, which is what he's forecasting.
Well, yeah, but that's still, he goes overseas, but he's still, like, you know, people know what's going on, and acceptance is a big thing, and I think that he's the longer this is going on, the deeper he's digging, basically.
And it'll be interesting. I think we're going to hear sometime during the course of post this show, and certainly tomorrow, where Chris Eubank is going to apply his trade next. I've got some ideas, but I'm not going to discuss them now because I think I know where he's going.
Okay.
Finally.
But don't you want to give us a little exclusive?
No, I don't, actually, because I've been told not to by those that know.
Oh,
but
really?
We'll find out soon enough, and I think it'll be an interesting fight. If it gets made this afternoon...
So you don't care about these numbers, no?
I do, but I think we've got enough juice in the tank to be able to get them without worrying about what Chris Eubank's fighting next. On a positive note, whilst we've been focusing on what Eddie Hearn hasn't done, there was a fight on the weekend which Katie Taylor... performed in and done. It wasn't a great fight.
Yeah,
was it?
Listen, she done what she had to do. She done what she had to do, and she got through. And what she done was she showed discipline. Like that girl that she was fighting, if she would have sat in the pocket with that girl, it would have become quite a difficult fight. And Katie, as we've known over the years, has been in many memorable, difficult fights, hard fights. So I like the way that she stuck to this game plan. Right, I've spoken to Katie on a number of occasions before and said, "So why do you choose to get involved?" Like Delphine Bassoon's one that we had those 2 wars with, one in Madison Square Garden, and the return actually in Eddie Hearn's back garden. And I was there live for that one, and when it was definitely silent because we was in lockdown.
There again.
It was in lockdown. Honestly, no, I was at ringside, Simon, and I'm watching it, and it was just like, it was at times painful to watch because it was so brutal at times. But Katie showed the blueprint on how to beat Delphine, but chose to get involved and chose to have a fight like she did against Serrano. Like, that's what she enjoys. She enjoys that, standing there and having that fight. So although it was not a particularly good fight, to watch as a spectacle on Saturday. I thought the discipline that she showed was brilliant. She got through that fight, which sets up the return with Amanda Serrano.
That's the conversation, is it, at Croke Park in Ireland. And I saw her when Eddie Hearn was in the ring talking about that. She was kind of getting emotional about it.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it's a big thing. And it's a good thing. It's a great thing for women's boxing. I want to make boxing about boxing and just and talk about boxing rather than say women's boxing, men's boxing, because the more you differentiate things, the more there's a differentiation. We want women's boxing to be successful and to thrive and survive.
Well, I think in recent times, to be fair, with what's happened,
with what happened with the women selling out Madison Square Garden, and of course with what the show that Benn put on.
Absolutely. Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall, that all women's event, 20,000 people. That was insane. I think the women really have evolved in this sport, and I just think that they are sort of showing the way a little bit. If I'm totally honest, when with the breakdown of all these fights that we've had, with like Joshua Fury, and then this Conor Benn fiasco that's been going on. Like, the girls have been delivering, man.
They have, but I suppose, like anything, when a sport's evolving, the moment there becomes more money in it, then there becomes more complications.
Sure.
And whilst we've got a level of money coming into women's boxing, we haven't got the sort of turn your lights out money that men's boxing has got. And then you start to get into complications because you're looking at the bigger picture of how much money you can make. Yeah. Is that the right fight to take right now? Because you can make more money by taking this fight, and ultimately you can get paid more times if you manage people's careers. But notwithstanding that, Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor in Croke Park in Ireland would be a spectacle worth seeing, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, we've talked about filling massive arenas, haven't we? Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields, 20,000. Now, if you go Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, they're breaking barriers again, going into football stadiums. I mean, that is just like, if you'd have asked me 3 years ago about girls filling 20,000 arenas, I would have thought you was slightly insane. But, like, the girls proved they can do that. It showed there's an appetite for it. And I think that would be a huge fight. I mean, anyone that hasn't seen that fight, go and watch, Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, Madison Square Garden. It's actually one of the best fights that's ever been in the Garden. And there's been many memorable fights there. So,
I've seen a few
credit where credit's due,
Jake Paul.
Yeah.
And I'm going to defer to you a lot in this conversation because you can educate, you can help me. I hate the term education, but I'll take it in this instance. You can make me aware, because I am so down on this crap with YouTubers. I realise that there's a seat for every arse, and everyone can have a view on things, and there's a different way of looking at the world. And because I like something doesn't mean that someone else doesn't have to like it or dislike it in equal measure. But talk me through, did you watch the fight?
I did watch the fight,
Talk me through this. I mean, I think you were in part responsible for this codswallop because you're at the genesis of it, aren't you?
Yes,
but
I
these
am.
People like KSI and Jake Paul and his brother.
Yeah, Logan,
walk me through it and walk. I mean, a lot of people already know this, but I've got no tolerance of it, and I'm constantly going, I don't want to watch that crap. I don't want to watch it. It's all about revenue for these guys. It's not a proper spectacle. Yeah. But help me think differently.
Right, so
it's going to be difficult.
I'm going to do that, actually, Simon. I mean, forget this nonsense that we saw, that we talked about on one of our shows, was it last week, the week before, this misfits boxing, where I see two girls, and it was absolute nonsense. It didn't even replicate boxing, and it's a joke, and I don't like to see any of that going on. But when we started this, like a few years ago, with KSI boxing, Joe Weller, and I think Jake Paul boxed on that one against... oh, no, he didn't. That was the other one. But KSI versus Joe Weller, it was at the Copper Box, and his agent at the time was Stuart Jones. Comes to me and said, Spence, can you put this fight on? I've got these two guys. And I'm thinking, I've never even heard of these two kids. When he mentioned the Copper Box, I was like, mate, that's 7,000 seats. What are you going on about? He was like... I've sold all the seats, so I just didn't realise the appetite for this. So when I got into this YouTube world, and then we put on the second event, which is up in Manchester, the AO Arena, which is the old MEN Arena, 20,000 seats. KSI boxed Logan Paul, first fight, and Deji, who's boxing Floyd Mayweather on November the 13th, he boxed Jake Paul. So when they boxed on this show, and it was a great event, but it was like, to explain it, Simon, we sold 20,000 seats in...
Can I just ask you, when you say you sold 20, I mean, who are you selling it to, boxing fans?
No, really the demographic is like kids between 13 and 16. Like, that's probably 80% of them, and the other 20% of the parents, probably. You know, that's where we're at with it. So that was the main demographic. But I think what Jake Paul has done is he's decided actually he fell in love with boxing then, and he's sort of like when he boxed on this show in Manchester, he boxed and he was very mediocre. It was white collar events, and that as a spectacle was great because that's what we saw it for. Head guards, you know, they were going at it, and it was great fun. Then Eddie Hearn decided, oh, this is good, and then Eddie Hearn sort of got them boxing out in the States with the KSI Logan Paul return, etc. They got into professional boxing. Then we're slightly different. So a lot of people don't accept that. They don't like the crossover. Keep them separate, that's fine. But what Jake Paul's done is he's kept plugging away, and actually he's got better, and he's getting better. But I think the frustration for the public at the moment is he's not boxing any boxers. He's boxing ex-UFC stars. Anderson Silva, who he boxed at the weekend, who had beat actually Chavez Jr., Julio Chavez Jr., he'd beaten him previously, but now he's 50 years of age. And so, do you know what I mean? It's very difficult. Although, as a spectacle, and I watched it, it was a very entertaining fight. I think that Jake Paul showed that he's improving all the time. You know, to be taken seriously as a boxer, he's got to start boxing some real boxers. But Silva, back in the day, he was a massive UFC star. Yeah. But the facts are the facts that he's 50 years of age. And yes, he's had a bit of a success in a boxing ring, but he's 50. Yeah. It was an entertaining fight. Silva was down in the last round. And Jake Paul won. A tough fought, but entertaining fight. So I think the answer to it is I'm starting to accept him as a boxer now because the kid's giving it everything, and he is starting to replicate something that's like a boxer. I thought it was entertaining. So, and he will bring a massive audience, a crossover audience.
Do you think so?
That some of them will like that. Boxing itself, boxing as a whole, will capture a part of that audience. There will be a trickle effect that actually go, I love this sport, and they start,
are they following,
being converted.
I mean, are they following him? Because some ways or another, they like his personality. I can't quite.
Yeah, no, I don't get that either.
Are they following him, or are they following, in some way, the sport?
They're following him.
They're following him.
Following
him. Why do you think that's going to translate then?
Because
into boxing, because if they're following a personality, right, and
the same reason.
In fact, you like this kid, right? There's limited boxing acumen there, isn't it? If he gets a live one. We'll go into that in a second. If he gets a live one, say Tommy Fury, and we'll cross that bridge in a second.
Yeah, sure.
He's probably like to get his face filled in. Right? But are we talking? You don't think so?
Well, I think it's a great fight. I honestly do. I think it's an interesting fight. I think it's an interesting fight, and that's where I think we.
Tommy Fury instead about him.
Well, no, I just think it will tell us where he's at, and it will tell us where Tommy's at. That's why it's an interesting fight, because I think that's the fight that we need to see, and that's a coming of age fight for Jake Paul, but it also tells us if Tommy Fury is going to be the real deal or not. So I think there's a lot of interest in that fight. But to answer your question about will these boxing fans that come and watch Jake Paul and they'd watch him throwing pennies up the wall, which they would, like they just love everything that he does. But to answer your question, I think that a lot of these fans that watch Jake Paul and watch the actual event and the spectacle, you will get a certain amount of them, whether that's 1%, whether that's 5%, some of them will go, actually, I really like this sport and it's entertaining.
Yeah, I just wonder, because I can't take wrestling seriously, but wrestling in America is a huge phenomenon. And you look at the events that are being sold out, I suppose there's a space for it. And talking about Fury, I mean, you're giving Tommy Fury a mention, or I brought him into the equation because I think it's more of a live fight for Jake Paul, where he's likely to get properly put into focus. Did you see that interview that Tyson Fury did with
True
Geordie? Yeah. And whilst I think the main part of it has gone around is Tyson's outburst, what do you make of that? I mean,
well, True Geordie's a guy that he was actually commentating on these KSI fights and all that. So he's from that world. He's from that YouTuber world and everything else. And he's quite a big name. And what did I make about that? I just thought that was a bizarre
But let's just set it up interview. For people who haven't seen that. And I'm not suggesting we plug someone else's broadcast.
Yeah.
But Tyson's lost the plot. He's questioned the validity of this Chisora fight, which we're all questioning. I've questioned it. You think Derek will come to fight.
So
we know
True Geordie went in quite hard on it.
He's gone in quite hard on him. And Tyson's just lost the plot and told him to suck this and F this.
Yeah.
Right? And then couldn't work out how to shut his phone off, right? So the guy's got the opportunity to take the mickey out of him further. But
it was not good.
I'm very fond of Tyson Fury at times and not so fond of him at other times. And when Tyson's in the frame of mind where he's really engaging company, he's no more charismatic sportsman.
Yeah, sure.
When I saw him in the dressing room at Wembley before the Dillian White fight, he was on message, he was on point. I mean, it's a dreadful suit he was wearing, but I think he's elegant. Yeah. But he was incredibly sophisticated in the language that he used and incredibly erudite and very charismatic.
Sure.
And then I've seen him a couple of other times where I think he's been pig ignorance and completely the other way.
Yeah.
And do you think that, I mean, we've seen We've seen Mike Tyson tell American anchors to go F themselves and whatever else. Do you think that we should be expecting a little bit more from Tyson Fury? If he's going to do this, I don't know why he did the interview in the first place. Surely he should have done a little bit of brief on what he was going to listen to. But it wasn't an unreasonable question. It was hard questioning, but it was an unreasonable question because the guy's got an opinion. But are you disappointed in Tyson to listen to that kind of...
Listen, I thought that was a stupid... You can see
it if you want to see it on your own.
Yeah, I thought that was a stupid interview to do, but I'm going to give you about Tyson Fury and why the public love Tyson Fury is he's unpredictable, right? And they love that, but also, and I think this is quite fair, he's real. What I'm saying is he says what he thinks, he's in control of everything that he does and everything else, and I think that's what the public like about Tyson, but that unpredictability... Do
the public love Tyson Fury?
Well, I think they do because I think it's the story, his journey is so inspirational that it gives others hope, and I think that's important.
Prior to the journey, right? And do you think it's the achievements that he's had, or do you think it's the journey he went on? Because prior,
I think it's...
Let me finish. Prior to the journey that he went on, when he won the world title and he ran into the press conference in a Batman outfit, and said, I'm going to lick that, whatever else, right? And it was very funny, and Vladimir Klitschko did not know what to make of it.
Yeah, sure.
And he went in and did something that was incredible, which is to go to Vladimir Klitschko when he was probably more in his pomp, win the belts and open up the division for everybody. There wasn't a lot of love for Tyson Fury.
No, there wasn't.
And of course, there was a situation where he'd been out in the press and had his views, his religious-based views on certain sections of society and certain persuasions that he didn't particularly want to entertain, and he got that awful situation where that virtue signaling Herbert, Gary Lineker, wanted to put him on stage at the Sports Personality of the Year and ambushed him with an apology. I.e., do you want to apologise for things you said? And Tyson didn't know what the hell was going on, did he? And I thought that was preposterous. And since then, he's always turned around and said, and well done to him, by the way, stick your awards up your back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You tried to do me in cold blood last time. But do you think there's an underlying popularity Tyson Fury, or do you just think there's an appetite for big fights and we're getting them put on the UK? I
think there's an underlying popularity for Tyson Fury because of his journey, because of that, like you highlighted there, going out to Germany when he was not particularly, he wasn't a fan favourite then. People didn't like him. They thought he had an attitude and they thought he was but I think it was from after that one, after he won the titles, then he went away and we know his well-documented problems that he had, ballooned up in weight, and it was the way that he come back that people just looked at him and went, as a humane story, people just go, respect, mate. I respect you for that. And then since then, he's taken the control. And you got to look at us when we went. When we went
away with some stuff, though, hasn't he?
He has.
He's got away. He's got scot-free with the castrated boar meat that he used as an excuse for some situations around drug issues that he had that got him in a retrospective ban that never consequenced him really because he wasn't fighting during that time when he was banned anyway. Yeah. And I just find it curious. I've sort of pivoted off Tommy Fury. If you see me pivot off this Jake Paul story, because I don't want to talk about it more than I actually have to.
I think we've pretty much covered the Jake Paul story. It is what it is. I think that he's slowly but surely getting accepted into the game because, he's starting to become quite entertaining to watch. The fight on Saturday night was good. Let's see him against Hughie Fury. Then perhaps we can then pick up and talk about Hughie Fury, talk about him.
Last question through grated teeth for Jake Paul. What about the idea that he can fight or will fight Nate Diaz?
Again, Nate Diaz was a massive name in the sport, wasn't he? But I want to see him in with some boxers. I get it, UFC stars and brilliant, and in America, maybe that's a big thing and everything else. But if he wants to get accepted into boxing, forget going after Nate Diaz, who's got this incredible record.
I'm going to pale back for a second. He doesn't want to be accepted into boxing. He wants to be accepted into the revenue stream.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that boxing is the heart of it all. Like boxing is the hub of what he's doing. Boxing's the hook. So he needs to get some credibility. He needs to do that, and I think by doing that, it's doing that. Going back to Tyson Fury, I think that, look, sheer entertainment. Look at us when we was at the press conference for him and Derek Chisora, Tottenham, White Hart Lane and everything else. Just see the guy and I go, you know what? He oozes charisma, and I think that
at times he does,
He does, and I think with Tyson Fury, he's going to be one of those guys, a little bit like Muhammad Ali, that he will get the credibility that he deserves more so in another 10, 15 years' time when people look back and go, do you know what? That was quite an incredible journey. What he's achieved, winning world titles, going off the rails, winning the world titles back. That trilogy with Deontay Wilder, where he took all those fights out in the States. Credit where credit's due, mate. I mean, I respect the man. I respect the man for his journey so far.
What, in your mind's eye or in your experience, and it doesn't really matter, because I'm going to do both. Look about fights that I've been to myself, and then look at fights that I didn't go to, but operate in a space.
Yeah.
What's the biggest fight involving a Brit in this century? In your mind, in your viewpoint, doesn't matter if you've been.
I think no. I think that what comes to mind. I think that Ricky Hatton going over to Vegas 2005. Was it 2005? Boxing Floyd Mayweather was 2007. Whenever it was, Ricky Hatton going over there, taking 20,000 Brits over there as well. That was a huge fight. Obviously, it didn't happen over here, but it was involving a Brit, and I think that was a huge fight and a huge moment for British boxing. I think the biggest moment for British boxing, probably Frochgrove's 2, because of the controversy surrounding the first one, and that was the fight because it took it back to stadiums.
Yeah, and it was the catalyst, despite the irritation that Anthony Joshua's team feel every time I mention this, that they are the stadium fillers. They were the people that lit the blue touch paper. It actually was Kyle Froch and George Groves that lit the stadium blue touch paper. But I've got a list of fights that I would put in the mix and see what you think of them. The fight that I think is probably the biggest fight, and it wasn't because of size, it was just because of the sheer nature of the opposition, or the perceived opposition. I actually think the person was in decline when he had this fight, but the perceived opposition and also the engagement from the boxing world was Ricky Hatton fighting Costa Tszyu.
That was huge. I was there.
As it was the MEN.
The MEN then, yeah. And it was on at like 2 in the morning to suit TV times, wasn't it? So at that stage, it was. I picked 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning to suit American TV rights, right? Because it was obviously a big fight in America. And I picked Frank Bruno up on the way to go up there. We went up there. We was doing some stuff from ringside. I remember looking around, and it was like, I don't know, 12, 1 o'clock or whatever. And obviously, we're in Manchester. It's fight night. What associates with boxing, drinking. Yep. So the crowd at that time, we always knew that it was going to be a bit of a disaster. But you see people literally like dropping from one tier to the other because it was at that time. And that, you're right in what you say there. That one slipped my mind. As a fight I've been to, that was probably the best atmosphere I've ever been to.
For me too.
For a fight, that was insane.
I've been fortunate enough to go to a lot of the fights, in and around the world, and in Britain. And I had no particular dog in the fight, besides the fact that Ricky Hatton is an Englishman.
Sure.
And of course, I'd want an Englishman to win, but I was going to see a good fight.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, Costa Tszyu came with a legendary status.
Yeah.
But the sheer intensity of the atmosphere, and you saw the people that supported Ricky Hatton. And I was quite fortunate to sit next to the late greats and sadly missed Dean Powell.
Oh wow,
who was there, and he was a fabulous trainer. And I saw him on many trips going to watch some of the great fighters, and I got to sit next to him and got him describing to me what he was seeing. Which was an incredible experience, because you got a view. You think you know a little bit about boxing because you watch a lot of it, and then you see someone that really knows what they're talking about.
Incredible insight, yeah.
But there's also a list of other fights. So that would be me. That would be me saying Costa Tszyu versus Ricky Hatton. You know, I've been a few other great fights that I went to, which I saw Mark Breland versus Lloyd Hunnigan, which, despite being a disappointing fight, was a good spectacle at the Wembley Arena. But there's a list of other ones. I wonder what you thought of these, just for the purposes of discussion. You've got Mayweather versus Hatton, which you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Pacquiao versus Hatton.
Yeah.
Fury versus Klitschko, which we've mentioned. AJ versus Klitschko, which from a broadcasting spectacle, I think if you listen to the commentary from Adam Smith, it sort of takes you into different places.
Oh, it does. Well, you know what? I was there again at ringside, and you look around, right, Simon, when you're in Wembley Stadium, the new Wembley Stadium, and it's obviously dark at this time. Everyone's got their phone lights on. You know, the ring walks have been incredible. And you just look around, you take that moment, and you think, as a sporting spectacle, I don't think there was nothing better. Like, the atmosphere of that, for me, was like, because of my personal investment with Anthony Joshua, I was just like, that will take some beating for me that night. That was insane.
And Froch Groves I went to, and I loved the fight. I loved the contribution of both fighters, obviously, because it was a battle, and it was an incredible fight, and I don't think anyone can suggest it wasn't. But I actually liked watching it back on TV more than I liked watching the fight, because the commentary I think it was Ian Darke, and it was...
Who was this for?
Froch Groves.
No, Froch Groves. It weren't Ian Darke then. Froch Groves was Adam Smith.
Was it Adam Smith?
Adam Smith and
Jim Watt.
Might have been someone like it. Might have been. I know it was definitely Adam Smith.
Because I remember the commentary basically turning around and saying he keeps hitting with the right hand. He shouldn't throw anything else.
Yeah,
he shouldn't throw anything else. And then there was a part in the corner where Groves went in fast and Foch went in very quick, and Groves ducked out from underneath him. And Jim went, and that's damn right cheek, absolute cheek. And it was the sheer the brilliance of the camera work on that particular fight. And when you see Foch getting knocked down in the first round, so Fury Wilder. I think that the trilogy, all of them were insane. You know, the first fight, the draw, the controversial draw, but Fury rising like the Undertaker, doing what he done after coming back from that incredible like Lazarus,
coming back from that journey that he'd been on, like, or this, you know, like where you just thought that. Oh, and I saw Tyson Fury right before he got back into any sort of shape. I saw him. And I was like, there's no way this kid's coming back from anything. He was so overweight. And that's why I'm so blown away by his journey. And I just look at, because when you looked at the size of him, 25 plus stone, and you just went, mate, this guy could never come back. It's not possible. He's gone beyond that. But he's come back and he's done what he's done. So that's why I just go, you got to respect the man for that. But yeah, I think that trilogy, but that last fight especially was insane. Was it Fury was on the floor 4 times?
Yeah, I've got 3 other fights to mention and see if you will still want to stick. I'm going to stick, even despite this list of fights that I've written down. I've got Calzaghe versus Roy Jones.
Lovely. I'll commentate on that, Madison Square Garden.
You've got Lewis versus Tyson. I went to that and I thought it wasn't a great fight. It was a great spectacle in the pyramids in Memphis, Tennessee, and great humidity, and sitting next to LL Cool J and listening to Don King shout in my ear. But I didn't think it was a great fight. And AJ versus Ruiz 2. Are you still going to... I'm going to stay with my view that the biggest fight that a Brit's been featured in is Hatton versus Costa Tszyu.
I like that. I do like it, to be fair. Do you know, I'm just torn between so many, like, obviously, Hatton, Mayweather. Hatton Costa Tszyu, for me, was like... That was just a magical moment for me. And I think there's 2 for me. 2 of my favourites are Hatton Costa Tszyu, and I've got to go AJ Klitschko. Man, I've got to throw a third in there. I've got to do George Groves and Cole Froch as well. I mean, them 3 are standout ones for me. Where you place them, everyone's got an opinion and everyone will decide, but you can't really argue with them 3 being there.
I just think the atmosphere at Costa Tszyu versus Ricky Hatton was so unique, but I also think you've got to give a hell of a lot of credit to those that made the fight for the Foch Groves second fight, because of the nature of the way they leveraged a very good fight into a universally discussed topic that the nation was invested in. And 90,000 people, or 80,000 people, as I've been corrected previously, 80,000 people went to Wembley Stadium, and the whole after people got undercard, and one of those people on the undercard was Anthony Joshua. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, incredible. Right, well, incredible.
Okay, this is the part of the show, or part of the discussion, when you and I get into questions that have been asked by people that have the fortune to watch us. And we get 3 questions, and they start with this. Andrew's asking, it's directed at me actually, stop teasing us, Simon. Are you going to get into boxing promotion or not? The answer is most likely. I don't think I need to be in a hurry. It's not a race to get involved in it. I'm spending a bit of time making sure that I understand the boxing world and that I align myself with either the right people. I either buy somebody's business, I either invest in somebody's business, or I start my own business. And so the likelihood is that I'll be involved with somebody's business, whether that means I go in as a chairman of a business, whether it means I go in as a funder and buy someone's equity. But yes, there's an ambition for me to do it.
Where do you place me in this business?
Spit bucket carrier. That's what I think will be a good role for you.
Why did you not have to think about that either?
No pause there. No buying time to think of an appropriate answer for you. Spit bucket carrier. There you go.
All right.
Right. Danny asks, Lomachenko is back.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, obviously...
not a great performance, but no. I mean, we saw glimpses of brilliance. There's the big question mark hanging over him now. His father time is starting to catch up with him.
He's 34.
Is he slowing down?
He's not had that many fights, and he's not taken that many beatings, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, does he... I think he does, but I'm going to phrase the question to you.
Yeah.
Does he beat Devin Haney? Because I've looked at it, and here's my view, and you can trump it probably with a greater insight. I look at who's beaten him, which is Teofimo Lopez. I look at who beat Lopez, which is George Kambosos. Yeah. And then I look at how George Kambosos was scored by Devin Haney. Yeah. So I look at Devin Haney and go, he beat the man that beat the man that beat the man. So I go in my sort of chronological thinking. Okay. I think Devin Haney at 23 years of age, with all the attributes that he got, is too much for Lomachenko.
Okay, I'm going to throw it out there. So stylistically, when you get to this level, it's all about styles. Styles win fights, and because A beats B doesn't mean B beats C, and etc. etc. Do you understand? Like, so what I'm saying is, I get what you're saying there with that path, with with Kambosos, Devin Haney, and etc. etc. But I think Lomachenko, looking at him there, I go, yeah, he's still got something here. Lomachenko's proven he's not going to get any better, but I think that Devin Haney. Like your Devin Haney, Shakur Stevensons, your Tank Gervonta Davis, all these guys, they are exceptional, and they will no doubt one of those will come out the leader. Right now, I think that Lomachenko is still the guy to beat, as in, if Devin Haney boxes Lomachenko, who wins that fight? Who wins that fight? That's a difficult one to call. I may lean towards Lomachenko. Yeah,
well, I'm going to stay. I'm not going to change my view.
You have a little wager on that?
I'm doing well with the wagers. I've just bet Jim White 1,000 quid for Newcastle not to fit in the top 6, and whatever I bet on, bet the alternative.
Okay.
So you'll be safe in that situation.
All right, perfect.
But I think Devin Haney has got all the toolkit to deal with Lomachenko. Maybe not Lomachenko from previous times.
I'm not saying. I
saw times in that Luke Campbell fight where if Luke Campbell had a bit more belief in himself, that he could have taken it away from Lomachenko.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, final questions from Brendan. It's an interesting one. This is thought-provoking. If you could go back and watch one fight live, what would it be?
It's quite a simple one for me, that. If I could go back to watch one fight live, it would be the fight that inspired me to get into boxing. That's Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hearns.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. If I could have been there, that was the one. When you watch something, I think it was April the 7th, 1985. I think that fight was. I was 10 years of age, so I was just started training. You had to be 11 to box. And I was there, and I just saw this fight, and that was the first time I captured an international fighter, really, because I grew up and like Barry McGuigan was like, everyone wanted to see. Like, I saw him box Pedrosa, and my dad took me around. Lose Steve Cruz. So that, I had the knowledge of Barry McGuigan. I had the knowledge of Mike Tyson, obviously, but only on the radio. But this is the first time where I've watched a fight and just gone, wow, like 3 rounds. You ain't going to get a better 3 rounds than that. So for me, I think if there was a fight that I could go back and watch, live, that I could be at live, it would have to be Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hearns, just because Hagler's my favourite fighter. You?
I don't know. I think maybe someone like Jake LaMotta.
Going right back.
Robinson. But I've got mixed emotions about because of the style of the fight. I think the Fuller in Manila would have been a fascinating fight to have gone to. I'm not sure I'd want to go to Zaire and go through that regime and that place to go and watch it. But I think the nature of the fight. Yeah. But I actually think the fight I'd like to have gone and seen is Muhammad Ali's first fight with Kenny Norton.
Wow.
Because I think that was an incredible fight.
Yeah.
And Ken Norton, never got the credit. That
he never got the recognition, did he?
He never got the plaudits and the rewards that he should have got. And he was the fighter that no one wanted to fight.
I like that.
And he gave everybody a handful, didn't he? And no one liked him.
Well, what about when you're bringing in Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier? I mean, the fights that he had with Joe Frazier, they were insane. Like, as you were talking about bravery from Ali. And
the first one, I think, was phenomenal.
It was incredible.
But I think the other ones became these... kind of almost awful spectacles of 2 men that weren't prepared to give an inch to one another in 15-round fights. Yeah, with the absolute brutality was almost jarring. I get it. It's a bit jarring.
Yeah, I do understand it. You've got to be,
So here we are. You've got your fight that you want to go back and see. I've got mine. It's one of those things you could probably go on forever and go, actually,
well, you would though if I could open up that little mind of mine a little bit more, and I had a little bit more time, and it would be.
If it was Jim White, he'd want to go back and see Randolph Turpin.
Here we go. I think Jim would go back to like Ken Buchanan or Jim Watt or.
I think Randolph Turpin in the 1920s.
Oh, do you think?
Or was it Bob Fitzsimmons? He was the first British heavyweight.
Are you sure Jim weren't live at ringside of Randolph Turpin in 1920s?
Exactly. My point would have been there.
He might have been there, actually.
He'd have been one of his peers. Right, that's it, Spence, for episode 4 Talk Boxing. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing, and of course, leaving those brilliant questions in the comment section below. But myself, a sick note. Sorry, Spencer. We'll see you next week.